Again, thank you all for being here. We're about to start something that I'm really passionate and excited about, which is talking about mission-aligned investing and how we express our support for the State of Israel and the Jewish people through the investments that we offer here at the foundation. And for those of you who have been clients and working with us for a long time, this might be a surprise, but this is actually not something new. We have been among the earliest investors in pro-Israel and pro-Jewish investment vehicles since they've begun to be introduced. So I'd love to welcome my friends on the panel. If you have a microphone, please join me up here. And I'm glad none of you are in a skirt. But thank you all for joining me today. We have representatives from 3 different managers who you are invested in as fund holders of the foundation. And joining me are Israel Bonds from our fixed income or bond asset allocation strategy. Gary from Israel Bonds is here with us today. I have my friend Jake from JLens. He's named very appropriately. They told me that was not part of your hiring decision, that you could be J for JLens, Jake. And we have my friend Daniel Frankenstein in from New York, who is with Joule Ventures. And Joule Ventures is in our endowment portfolio, which is part of our alternative assets exposure. So I'd love to start our panel discussion just by asking each of you to introduce yourself and just kind of a quick overview of what you do and how you are accessing the market today in your respective businesses. So Gary, you're next.
Okay. Well, thank you. I'm happy to be here this morning. I'm filling in for Larry Berman, who's our Vice President of Institutional Sales. He is very sick in New York right now, but he and I spoke yesterday, and so I'm glad to be able to fill in for him. I've been working for Israel Bonds now for almost 14 years. I have a bachelor's of business administration from Washington University and a master's of business management from UTD here in Dallas. And if you would have asked me when I graduated, either undergraduate or graduate school, what would be the 2 areas of business that I would absolutely never work in, the first would have been accounting, the second would have been finance. And so the fact that I'm working almost exclusively in finance now is just a miracle to me. But miracles come along with working in the Jewish community. So I'm very happy to do what I do. My family is very involved in the Jewish community. And as I said, I've been doing this for a long time. Israel Bonds has been around for a long time. They've been around since 1951 when Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister of Israel, first introduced Israel Bonds. And since then, we have sold $54 billion worth of bonds since 1951. And I'll talk a little bit more about that later, but I just want you to get to know me.
Jake?
Hi everyone, I'm Jake Herman. I am Director of Communications and Development at JLens. I'm not the only Brit in the room for once, which is nice. Thank you, Megan, for hosting us today. This is my first time in Dallas and my first time in Texas. I live in Boston, Massachusetts now, and flew in last night. So JLens, our business is shareholder advocacy. So the Dallas Jewish Community Foundation has been a partner of ours for about 4 or 5 years. JLens has been around since 2012. And right now is a very exciting time for us because 2 weeks ago we launched a new product, the first ever Jewish advocacy ETF on the New York Stock Exchange. We already have over $100 million in assets in that brand new vehicle within the last 2 weeks. We have about $300 million in our previous strategy, which is a separately managed account strategy. And that strategy it's an own and advocate strategy. So we're looking to have similar risk and return to the S&P 500. We have many of the largest US public companies that we're invested in. And the reason that we're holding those companies is so we can do advocacy on behalf of shareholders in the Jewish community, on behalf of you kind folks in Dallas at the Jewish Community Foundation, and push those companies to do better on combating anti-Semitism, on supporting Israel, and on various tikkun olam, repairing the world issues. I've been with JLens for about 3 years now. JLens has been an affiliate of the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, for the past 2 years. And as I said, it's a really exciting time for us, and I can't wait to answer some of your questions.
Good morning, everybody. Daniel Frankenstein, Joule Ventures. Just like the monster, it's okay to laugh. It's a fun icebreaker. Thank you so much, Megan, for arranging this. Thank you all for having us. I'm a co-founder and partner at Joule Ventures. We are a US-based venture capital firm, but we exclusively back entrepreneurs coming out of the Israeli ecosystem. This is a really interesting journey for me personally, because I'm in this business by accident. I started my career in the consulting space, worked for a New York Stock Exchange traded best practice research firm out of Washington, D.C. As the financial crisis was taking hold, they were looking for revenue outside of the United States, specifically looking for places that had large numbers of publicly traded businesses in the United States. Israel happens to have the third largest number of publicly traded businesses on US exchanges for any foreign country aside from Canada and China. So at 27 years old, I was sent to Israel to be the country manager of this US-based business. Built their business in Israel for a couple of years, but saw this unbelievable technology ecosystem. But there were two challenges. One, folks like yourselves couldn't access that ecosystem from the investment side. And two, the entrepreneurs in that ecosystem had a tough time going to market here in the United States. So we launched our firm 15 years ago to be a bridge. How do we help more Israeli entrepreneurs go to market more effectively in the United States? And how do we provide a sophisticated premium portfolio investment opportunity for sophisticated US investors to back those entrepreneurs? Fast forward to today, we're an institutional early stage investor, still exclusively focused on the Israeli ecosystem, and absolutely delighted to be here, talk about everything technology, everything Israel, everything related to how we produce returns. And just one plug as well. We exclusively back entrepreneurs in the Israeli ecosystem because fundamentally they're better. We do not believe you have to make a trade-off between your mission and returns. And we're a top decile net cash returner in the asset class. And I don't say that to toot my own horn. I say that to toot the horn of our portfolio companies that have generated those returns. So my mission is also to make sure that people know they don't have to make that trade-off. Just do the same amount of diligence that you would do on any for-profit type of investment.
Thank you. And I didn't actually plan that tee up, but that was a perfect lead-in to my first question. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a recovering private banker. I spent 15 years in finance. I also was a little bit of an accidental finance person. I was a marketing and psychology major at Indiana University and was offered a job at JP Morgan when I graduated in 2008. And I really fell in love with the idea that you could do well and do good at the same time, whether we're talking about your personal assets or the assets of institutions or clients that you're managing money on behalf of. And as also a relative newcomer to Judaism and the Jewish community, it was really interesting to me, this psychology of an investor in the Jewish community about Israel. Because for a long time, the generation like my in-laws who grew up with Israel always being the charity case, for lack of a better term. You've got to support Israel. We need to do it. It doesn't really matter what the returns are. It's just the right thing to do. And I think we've really evolved as a society, and I think Israel has really evolved as a country, and that is worthy of investment, and that it's exciting and interesting and compelling to invest in Israel, and it feels good, which is kind of a nice change of pace. But I think the average investor is a little bit, hasn't quite caught up necessarily to that mentality. How would each of you, and Daniel, you already sort of addressed that. So for Jake and Gary, how are you talking to your prospective investors or your longstanding investors about the changing dynamic of potential in being pro-Jewish when you're investing in the US stock market, or being pro-Israel in looking at your fixed income allocation?
You want to start?
Sure. So I think JLens is the outlier here because our strategy is only in domestic equities. But a big part of what we do is look at how those companies are operating in Israel. And we're encouraging companies, S&P 500 companies, to have economic ties to Israel and to push back against our opponents in this arena, which are the BDS movement, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement, who are doing the direct opposite, trying to push companies to pull their business from Israel. So JLens is fundamentally a research and advocacy nonprofit organization. We're an RIA as well. And in our research, we found that approximately 220 out of the 500 largest US public companies have operations or customer relationships in Israel. So that can be ranging from having offices and staff directly in Israel to having R&D centers or partnerships with R&D centers in Israel, having acquired Israeli companies, or just having a customer base in Israel. And over the last year, we've counted that 75 of those companies have been targeted for boycott or divestment from Israel. And so our role in the space has been pushing back against that. A few of the ways that we do that, so we're in direct dialogue with those companies. We're here to represent the shareholders, and that gives us a seat at the table. It gives us a voice in that arena. So we're in direct dialogue with company management and with investor relations, with HR, depending on the topic. And one of the other major ways that we do that is through the proxy voting and shareholder advocacy process. So every year we're seeing proposals that are put forward by BDS proponents on the proxy ballot at major companies. So some examples from last proxy season, and we've seen some coming up for this year. Proxy season is approximately from April to June, when most companies have their annual general meetings. And last year we saw two major proposals. One was at Amazon, which was a proposal essentially asking the company to reevaluate its cloud computing contract with the Israeli government. So Amazon and Google have a joint $1.2 billion cloud computing contract with the Israeli government. And this proposal was asking them to revisit that relationship. And what we did was go to all of the major shareholders in Amazon, BlackRock, Vanguard, Morgan Stanley, and others, and speak to them about the issue and ask them to make a common sense voting decision and vote against this proposal that we saw as discriminatory against Israel. And so in 2023, it got 34%. Last year, we managed to get the vote down to 17%. And that was one example of that kind of advocacy. We've also seen...
Also in the last year, the performance. Can you talk a little bit about the outperformance of the SMA over the broader market?
Yeah, so we're doing this advocacy. The background to this advocacy, we don't see a trade-off at all. Sorry to have got off topic from the question, but we don't see a trade-off at all because our strategy is designed to have similar risk and return profile to the S&P 500. As Megan alluded to, I believe it slightly outperformed the S&P 500 in the last year, but that's by coincidence. Our goal is to track very, very closely. And we believe you can have, as Megan said, you can do well and you can do good. You can do well, track the S&P 500, and you can have your voice, this strong Jewish advocacy voice in the arena in order to support Israel.
I think it's really exciting too because JLens, with the introduction of a retail product, is now extending and we're really sort of catching up to our peers in the Christian community. There's a number of Christian value ETFs that the average person with just a regular size investment account like myself can now access and express my values through my own investment portfolio, which I think is a really exciting new chapter. So thank you for sharing that.
Great.
And Gary.
So it's real simple with Israel bonds. I mean, in 1951, when they first introduced Israel bonds and they started selling them, the goal of Israel bonds was to provide capital for the state of Israel to build everything that they needed: roads, hospitals, airports, seaports, because it was a brand new country and they needed money to do all those things. Fast forward to just before COVID, Israel was within the top 10 economies in the world. So in terms of investing in the state of Israel, you're investing in a winner already when you invest in an Israel bond. Our bonds range in, the rates on our bonds, the coupons on our bonds range from 4.17 to 5.71%, depending on how much you're investing and for what period of time. And we try to keep our interest rates just above. It's always going to be US Treasuries plus a certain number of basis points, plus a spread. So we try to stay a little bit ahead of US Treasuries in terms of the rates that we offer. And listen, with BDS and everything else that's been going on, the anti-Semitism and so forth, I mean, we've grown tremendously. I mean, since October 7th, we've sold $4.5 billion worth of bonds. And in that period of time, we've signed up 8,000 to 10,000 new investors that had never invested in an Israel bond before. So when they talk about the resilience of the Israeli people and how it's going to take some time for them to spring back after what happened on October 7th, they're very resilient, and they're already springing back, and the economy is already springing back. And so we're not concerned at all about the value of our bonds. And we appreciate the commitment of the Dallas Jewish Community Foundation. They just bought another $400,000, I'm sorry, another $400,000 worth of Israel bonds this week, and they hold over $4 million worth of Israel bonds. So they're committed, you're committed to Israel bonds, and the numbers just keep growing. So I don't look at it as a risk at all. In fact, I look at it as a very good investment.
Thank you. So I know we're all, we have 10 minutes left. Okay. So I know we're all looking for something to talk about at cocktail parties, given the slow news cycle and that there's not a whole lot going on in the world. And so I'd love for Daniel to talk a little bit about some of the highlights of what we're investing in through our commitment to Joule Ventures. And before I hand it over to Daniel, I just want to remind everyone that these managers are part and parcel with our investment strategy. That is actually quite an unusual approach. Most of my peers have a separate pool of money that this is the impact investment. This is your mission-aligned pool. We sort of flipped that mentality on its head. We said, we are the Jewish Community Foundation. It should be infused in everything that we do, aligning ourselves with the values of our people, of our culture, and of our tradition. And so I just wanted to highlight that because it is a bit of an unorthodox approach to investment management in the sector. So give us some cool cocktail party conversation starters.
Absolutely, because I know there's, as you said, there's nothing to talk about. First, maybe let me give you a sense for our strategy, why we do what we do, where we do it, and then some examples. So first of all, how many of you have been to Israel? Okay, so most of you all, but maybe let me just very high level. In Israel, everyone has compulsory military service. 3 years for men, 2 years for women. And, but however, most of the people that serve in the Israeli military don't actually touch a conventional weapon after basic training. Many go into technology, research and development units in the Army that have very specialized skill sets in the advanced intelligence gathering, cybersecurity, offensive cyber, artificial intelligence, mobile technologies, and they learn very interesting skill sets that are not commercially available. How many of you have heard of the 8200 intelligence unit? Okay, interesting. So this is great. So the largest unit in the Israeli military is called the 8200 intelligence unit. It skims the top 1% off of all Israeli high school students. They start doing aptitude tests around 14, 15 years old. And they're testing for one thing. How quickly do you learn? That's it. They take the top 1% of quick learners and they put them in this unit where they do their military service behind a computer. They are learning advanced engineering and technical skills. They're learning advanced security, cybersecurity, cyber warfare. And these are the entrepreneurs of the future. They learn skill sets that are not commercially available. You cannot learn these skill sets in the classroom. You cannot learn some of these military grade types of coding skills in the classroom. So they spend time in the 8200 unit. And by the way, there's a number of offshoots and specialties. There's 8-1, there's Talpiot, there's Mamram. There's so many different places where these young folks learn tons and tons of skill sets that, again, you cannot learn in school. But then they do go to school. And they go to school at some of the most elite universities in the world. The Economist magazine out of the UK does a global 1,000 index of institution of higher learning. There's only one place in the world that over half their institutions of higher learning, that a country has over half their institutions of higher learning on this global 1,000 index, and that's Israel. Most of these institutions are public institutions. Said another way, kids don't graduate with debt, which means they can be entrepreneurs. They don't have to fulfill that obligation. So you take this unbelievable group of entrepreneurs, this unbelievable education system, this unbelievable training in the military, and you have the entrepreneur built for the future. You have a resilient entrepreneur who has real world and life skills, who has worked on teams, has trusted folks that they work with, and non-commercially available skill sets that my firm has the opportunity to back. So we saw this starting about 15 years ago, but it's really hard for the American investor to look at these deals and understand exactly what you're looking at, how to validate these deals, how to validate these markets. That's what we do at Joule Ventures. I'm going to give you all two examples of companies that we backed historically because we actually know how they panned out. And then I'll give you one example of a new deal we're in the process of doing in your fund. And I'll do it really quickly. Really quick. First, I met with an entrepreneur back in 2011 at a coffee shop in Tel Aviv. He was my neighbor in Tel Aviv. And he was in the 8200 intelligence unit, but a little offshoot. And what they basically did is they took this entire unit of the top 1% of high school students, and then they took the 1% of that 1%. And they said, you know what? You're not doing your Army service yet. Half of you are going to go to school and get a PhD in physics, and the other half of you are going to go to school and get a PhD in math. Then you're going to come back to us, and you're going to do research and development for the future of warfare and the future of intelligence gathering. So I'm sitting with this guy who was the top of that group, who got sent back to school for physics, came back and did his Army service. And he built a system in the military called behavioral biometrics. That is, layman's terms, is how you move as an indicator of who you are. So as you might imagine, there might be an application for a technology that could tell you who is behind a computer terminal at a certain particular time. And that was the technology that this individual developed in the Army. He rolled out of the Army and he said, I want to introduce behavioral security for US financial institutions. So I said, you're going to have to, speak English because I don't know what that means. He said, listen, the way you move your finger on a mouse trackpad, how hard you press, how fast you move, do you click on the top right of something, the bottom left of something? These are all things that are unique to you. You don't know where your mouse is, you do one of these, you do one of those, you do it the same way every time. These are unique identifiers of who you are as a great way to understand if the person who logged in to an online banking session is actually the same person who made the bank transfer. So huge opportunity to detect fraud. So we took this to a few banks in the United States who literally kicked us out of the room. They said, this is Star Wars, it can't be done, you gotta go. So came back to the entrepreneur, said, hey, listen, we got some pretty bad feedback. Like, no one thinks it can be done. He said, they're wrong. I said, these are some heavy hitters in the financial services industry. They're not usually wrong. He said, here's the deal. I built the system already, and it works. And thank goodness for me, the IDF doesn't sell to banks. So we wrote him a check. Went on a 10-year journey with this company, sold them early last year in the middle of this war for $1.3 billion to a UK-based private equity firm. See, UK, look at that. Great outcome. I'm going to skip the second example because I went too long. I want to tell you about a really interesting company that is in your fund right now. We're executing that deal as we speak. And interestingly enough, in small world, Texas Capital Bank is looking at potentially being a customer of them. This is in the artificial intelligence space for personal financial decision making. Most folks in our country do not have access to wealth management. And they just have a checking account, they have credit card, they have debt, and they are not optimized for their personal financial decision making. They don't have a family CFO. Guess how much time people spend on their personal finances every month, average? Most people? Yeah, less than a minute. That's a golden minute for a financial institution. Imagine if you had a autonomous, artificial intelligence-based family CFO where your bank offered you the opportunity to autonomously move money between checking, savings, credit card, tuition payments, completely optimizing your financial decision-making, which, by the way, not being optimal in that regard costs the average American consumer $5,000 to $7,000 a year. That is big money for people making the average per capita income here in this country. Huge opportunity. This entrepreneur rolled out of the 8200 intelligence unit, is a Harvard PhD. He wrote his PhD thesis on personal financial decision making. Really incredible domain expert. So just to zoom out, you have exposure now to the future of cybersecurity, the future of artificial intelligence, the future of business infrastructure from a technology standpoint. That is what we do, and we do so actively. We are not writing checks to our portfolio companies, hoping that they show up in a few years, having increased their value. We're actually their partner. We're their partner in going to market. We're their partner in helping to get customers. And absolutely delighted to be partners with all of you because, and I'll close with this, the Jewish community is criminally underinvested in Israel. The Jewish community has let the rest of the world generate billions and billions and billions of dollars in return because our community only sees Israel as a place exclusively for philanthropy. It can be both. It can be an and, it doesn't have to be an or. And you guys are pioneers in looking to generate great and top asset returns out of a place that's mission aligned. And I think that's phenomenal and give great credit to Megan.
Because we are the first Jewish community foundation to invest in your fund. Is that right?
That is right. We actually, a majority of our capital does not come from, we don't talk to Jewish money. It's been,
until today, we have some Jewish money in this room.
That's fine. That's fine. Just as a point, our biggest investor is the Sovereign Wealth Fund of the Native American tribe. We have multiple funds of multi-billion-dollar registered investment advisors. We work with a bunch of big family offices. They don't care where we do what we do. They don't care how we do it. They just care that green is green, that it generates returns. Obviously, and of course, we have members of the Jewish community that are invested with us. We have private individuals, Jewish family offices, and now you guys, and delighted to grow that.